If she's really that naive, the plan will be easy. That's the very first sentence I heard the night I met my daughter-in-law's family. I wasn't even inside the dining room yet. I was still standing in the hallway of their big Charleston house, holding a small casserole dish like some polite old lady desperate to impress new in-laws. The words floated through the half-open door, soft, careless, dripping with arrogance. For a moment, I wondered if I misheard. But then came a second voice, a woman's voice, polished and sharp like a manicured nail tapping a wine glass. Trust me, she won't question anything. She looks simple. Simple. Naive. Easy. They were talking about me. I stood there staring at the antique mirror hanging in the hallway. In the reflection, I saw the same familiar image. A 67-year-old black woman with silver curls pinned neatly behind her ear, wearing her Sunday church cardigan and holding a dish of peach cobbler. And for the first time that night, I wondered what exactly they saw when they looked at me and why it mattered so much. But instead of walking away or barging in or dropping the warm casserole on their expensive floor, I took a breath, a long one. Slow enough to steady the little tremor growing in my chest. Then I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room fell silent for a heartbeat, just enough for guilt to flicker across a few faces. But the performance began quickly. Smiles stretched too wide, compliments spilled too fast, chairs scraped back like they were suddenly thrilled to see me. "Welcome, Mrs. Harris. We've heard so much about you. That dish smells amazing." Their voices overlapped, piled on top of each other, a mess of exaggerated Southern hospitality that tasted like an artificial sweetener. I walked to the table and set the cobbler down, pretending I hadn't heard a thing, pretending I was exactly what they believed. Quiet, harmless, unassuming. My daughter-in-law, Ava, glided toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, you made it. I was telling my family how humble and old-fashioned you are." Old-fashioned. Another polite way to say easy to manipulate. She slipped her arm through mine and guided me to the seat at the far end of the table, the least important place. Not next to her, not next to my son, not even near the center. No, they sat me at the corner, beside a decorative plant. I didn't complain. I simply folded my napkin onto my lap and looked around the room. Every detail told me something. The way Ava's uncle kept glancing at my hands, like he expected them to be shaking from age. The way her mother whispered into her wine glass. The way her younger brother stared at me, eyes narrowed, cataloging something. Throughout the dinner, small comments sprinkled the air like breadcrumbs in a trail that led straight to a secret I wasn't supposed to discover. "So, you live alone, right? You must find that house of yours too big to manage at your age. Do you ever think of having someone handle your finances for you? My sister works at a law office. She can help with paperwork if you ever get confused." Confused, naive, simple, easy. They didn't ask about my job, my life, my passions, my loss, my past. They asked about my assets. The more they asked, the more their intentions glimmered beneath the polite surface like fish beneath dark water. But I kept smiling softly, stirring my iced tea, answering slowly, letting them believe the story they'd already written about me. After dinner, while dessert plates were being cleared, I excused myself to the powder room. On the way, I passed by the very same doorway where I'd first overheard them. And that's when I heard it again. Another whispered thread of the truth. Once she signs the paperwork, everything gets simpler. Her son already trusts us. Honestly, it's almost too easy. This time, my heartbeat didn't skip. It steadied. Something inside me clicked into place. I'd spent the last 2 years rebuilding my life after losing my husband. I had survived grief that buried me. I had handled every bill, every repair, every piece of paperwork on my own. I wasn't naive, I wasn't simple, and I sure as hell wasn't easy. But they didn't know any of that. because I had walked into their house wearing modest clothes, bringing homemade dessert, speaking softly the way older black women are taught to do in polite Southern gatherings. They thought my gentleness was weakness. They thought my kindness was confusing. They thought my silence was ignorance. And they were wrong. When I walked back to the dining room, an odd calm washed over me, like the deep, still quiet before a storm breaks. I looked at every face at that table, every smirk, every calculating glance, every false smile. Then I smiled back, warm, gentle, exactly the way they expected, because I knew in that moment that they had a plan for me. But they had no idea I had just started making one of my own. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I drove home, changed out of my cardigan and washed the sweet tea scent off my hands, the words from the dinner kept echoing in my head like distant footsteps in an empty hallway. If she's really that naive, the plan will be easy. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking around my quiet house, the one I had lived in for 32 years, the one my husband and I built piece by piece, paycheck by paycheck, the one I had tended alone after he passed, the one filled with memories, his fishing hat still on the hook, the quilt I sewed during our first winter, the rocking chair he bought when our son was born. This home held my entire life, and yet somehow Ava's family spoke as if it already belonged to them. I didn't have solid evidence yet, just whispers, glances, half-finished sentences. But there was something else. Something deeper, older, a feeling I'd learned to trust, the same feeling that warned me years ago not to lend money to a cousin who disappeared right after, the same feeling that told me to keep copies of every bill, every deed, every insurance statement. Some people call it intuition. I call it survival instinct. The next morning, sunlight spilled into my kitchen through the blinds, warm and innocent. I hummed while I cracked eggs into a bowl, trying to pull myself back into routine. I always find comfort in morning rituals. The scrape of a steel spoon against a mixing bowl, the scent of coffee grinds blooming under hot water, the soft thud of the newspaper landing on my porch. I needed normal, but normal didn't last long. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was my son, Caleb. "Morning, Mama. Just checking in. Ava's parents adored you last night." A small, ironic laugh almost slipped out, but I held it back. "Oh, is that so?" "Yeah. They said you're the sweetest, most humble person they've ever met." Humble. There it was again. "Caleb?" I said softly. "Did they say anything else?" "No, not really. Why?" "Just wondering." He chuckled. "You worry too much. They're good people." Good. Good people don't whisper about plans behind half-open doors. But I didn't argue. Not yet. I let him talk about his week, about work, about the engagement party details. I added gentle hums and uh-huhs, the way mothers do. But inside, I felt something shift, something subtle but powerful, a quiet alertness. When the call ended, I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the coffee slowly going cold. Around noon, I stepped outside to water my hydrangeas. It was a warm Carolina day, humid enough to make my curls frizz, but I always loved the smell of wet soil. As I bent down to check the roots, a voice called from across the fence. "Morning, Martha." It was my neighbor, Mrs. Parker, walking her terrier. "I meant to tell you," she added, stepping closer. "Your daughter-in-law was here yesterday afternoon, with a man I didn't recognize." My heart paused mid-beat. "Before dinner?" I asked casually. "Oh, yes. They were walking around your front yard. He had some kind of clipboard. Looked official. Real estate, maybe?" She shrugged. "Didn't want to assume." But it was too late. My mind had already assumed. "Thank you," I said with a polite smile, though my stomach tightened. "I appreciate you telling me." She nodded, then kept walking. Her dog barked at a squirrel. The world looked painfully normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Why would Ava bring someone to my property before our dinner? Why wouldn't she mention it to me? And why, out of all things, would he have a clipboard? Suddenly, the whispers didn't feel like whispers. They felt like warnings. Inside the house, again, I went straight to my husband's old desk in the study. It still smelled faintly of cedar and his aftershave. I opened the top drawer and pulled out the folder where I kept all my important documents: deeds, bank statements, insurance forms. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for yet, but something in me needed to check, to verify, to make sure nothing had been tampered with. Everything looked normal, every paper in its place. But as I sorted through the documents, I realized something unsettling. This folder was thin, too thin. My husband always kept duplicates, copies of everything. There should have been more. I checked the second drawer, the third, the fourth. Nothing. Then, slowly, a memory surfaced. One I hadn't thought about in years. My husband, late at night, slipped a small brass key into my palm. "Keep this somewhere safe," he whispered, "and don't use it unless you need to." Back then, I didn't question him. We've been married for 38 years. I trusted him with my life. He said it was for an emergency. I tucked the key into a little velvet pouch in my jewelry box and never touched it again, until now. I walked to my bedroom, opened the top drawer of my dresser, and pulled out the pouch. The key glinted softly in my hand. Heavy, cold, full of unspoken stories. A safe deposit box. That had to be it. Something my husband left behind. Something he didn't want anyone else to access. Not even our son. And definitely not Ava. For the first time in days, I felt a spark. Not fear, not suspicion, but direction. Whatever was happening around me, whatever Ava's family was plotting, whatever plan involved my home and my future, I suddenly knew where I had to go next. To the bank, to the truth, and maybe, just maybe, to the reason they thought I was easy. I left for the bank early the next morning, before the sun burned through the Carolina fog, before neighbors brewed their first cup of coffee, before my phone had a chance to ring with any voice that might sway my focus. The brass key felt heavier than it should, tucked safely inside my jacket pocket. I kept touching it with my fingertips as I walked to my car, as if making sure it was really there, as if it might vanish and take all my suspicions with it. The drive was quiet. Too quiet. No gospel station this time, no humming, no soft whisper of prayer under my breath, just the sound of the engine and the growing echo of last night's words. If she's really that naive, the plan will be easy. The bank was nearly empty when I arrived. Just a young teller at the counter and a man drinking coffee from a paper cup in the corner. I approached the teller with the kind of calm, polite women my age have perfected after decades of being underestimated. "Good morning," I said, sliding the key forward. "I believe this belongs to a box here." Her eyes widened slightly. "Yes, ma'am, one moment." She typed quickly, then nodded. "Vault number 212. The system shows it hasn't been accessed in 12 years. 12 years. Right after my husband died. My breath caught, but not from fear, from the slow understanding that he'd left something behind, something meant for me alone, something he knew I'd need only when the world around me became dangerous. "Please follow me," she said. We walked down a long hallway lined with silver doors. The temperature dropped as we moved. Vault rooms always feel like winter, even in July. She unlocked the door, handed me the small metal box, and stepped out. I sat alone at the little table inside, my hands resting on the cool steel. For a moment, I just stared. It wasn't fear holding me still. It was the knowledge that whatever waited inside would change something, maybe everything. Finally, I lifted the lid. Inside were 3 things. A thick envelope sealed with my husband's handwriting, a stack of documents bound with a rubber band, a USB drive, small, black, unmarked. I touched the envelope first. My husband's script, steady, careful, felt like a hand on my shoulder. "Martha, if you are reading this, it means you found the key and you are facing something I worried might come someday." My breath hitched. I've seen people change when money, property, or control enter the picture. I've seen how families can turn cruel when they think someone is vulnerable, especially someone who looks soft, as you often do to others. Soft. The word cut deeper than I expected. You are kind, Martha, not weak, and I want to make sure no one mistakes the two. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his voice, steady even in ink, settle into the cracks of my fear. The letter continued. You must protect what we built. If Caleb ever marries into a family that pushes too hard, asks too many questions, or tries to manage your decisions, use the documents in this box. They will remind you and prove to others that you are not to be controlled. My hands trembled, just once, then steadied. I opened the stack of documents next. Deeds, financial statements, insurance policies, a notarized letter confirming the house was purchased entirely under my name after his passing. There was also a trust document, something I didn't even know existed. A trust legally protects the property from being transferred without my consent, regardless of marital ties or family pressure. I whispered into the cold room, "So that's what you left me, sweetheart. Armor." The USB drive was the last object. I plugged it into the small bank computer. A single folder appeared. Inside, scanned copies of every legal document and one video file titled, "For Martha." I clicked it. There he was, my husband. Sitting in his workshop, the one that always smelled of sawdust and motor oil, his beard a little uneven, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes warm. "If someone's trying to push you," he said, "pause. Look them in the eye, and remember they don't know who they're dealing with." He chuckled, a soft, familiar sound. "You're the strongest woman I ever known. Just quiet about it. Use what's in this box, and don't let anyone make you small." The video ended there. Just 8 seconds. 8 seconds that changed everything. I left the vault room with the documents in my purse and a different kind of weight in my chest. Not the heaviness of fear, but the firmness of understanding. I was not alone, not unprepared, not naive, and definitely not easy. When I stepped outside, the sun was higher, brighter, almost welcoming. I inhaled deeply, the humid air settling over me like a fragile blanket. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from Ava. "Hi, Mom. Just checking something. Do you happen to know where the deed to your house is? Dad needs it for some paperwork he's helping us with. No rush. Just let me know I stared at the screen. No rush." A heart emoji. Soft, sweet lies. But all I could hear was the echo from the night before. If she's really that naive, the plan will be easy. Except now, I wasn't walking blindly. Not anymore. And I realized something powerful, something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I didn't need to rush. I could watch them instead. Watch them reveal themselves piece by piece. Watch them dig the hole deeper. Watch them inch toward the trap they thought they set for me. Because of the plan they had, it wouldn't be easy anymore. Not now that I know. I didn't reply to Ava's text. Not right away. Not even within the hour. Instead, I let the message sit on my phone screen like a tiny spider on a wall, harmless from a distance, but dangerous if you got too close without watching its movements. By the time I got home, the late afternoon sun had dipped behind the tall pines lining my backyard, leaving long shadows stretching across the porch. I set my purse down, made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and sat at the kitchen table the way I always did when a storm was building. But this time, the storm wasn't in the sky. It was in the house. It was in the text. It was in the whispers I overheard. And now it was in every small, innocent detail that suddenly didn't feel innocent at all. The first detail appeared 20 minutes later when I heard footsteps on my porch, slow, deliberate, almost testing the wood planks. My heart tightened, but when I peeked through the curtains, I saw a woman I recognized from down the street, Mrs. Harris, a retired school counselor who'd lived in the neighborhood since the 80s. She held a small box in her hands. "Martha," she called gently, "you home, sugar?" I opened the door. "Evening," I said, trying to sound calm. "Everything all right?" She smiled, handing me the box. "This came to my address by accident. It has your name on it. I figured I'd bring it over before it gets dark." I looked at the label. My name, my address. But the sender was unfamiliar. Tidewater Insurance and Legal Processing Center. "Thank you," I told her. "I appreciate it. You know I'm always here if you need anything," she added softly. "Anything at all." Her tone was too warm, too careful, like she sensed something was wrong but didn't know how to ask. I forced a smile. "I'm all right. Truly." She gave a gentle pat to my arm and walked away. When I closed the door behind me, I stood still for a moment with the box pressed against my chest. The weight was wrong, too light for something important, too heavy for something trivial. I set it on the table and opened it. Inside was a stack of pre-printed forms and a letter. "Dear client, as requested, enclosed are the updated guardianship assessment forms to be reviewed prior to initiating a petition." The rest blurred. Guardianship, assessment, petition. My breath thinned. My hands tightened around the letter until the edges dug into my skin. Someone was preparing paperwork to declare me unable to manage my own affairs. Someone had used my name. Someone had given this company my address. Someone had asked for these forms, and I didn't need to wonder long who that someone was. The second detail arrived an hour later when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Ava. It was my son. "Mom, Ava told me she texted you. Did you get her message?" I hesitated before answering. I did. And I heard impatience in his voice, but also something else. Uncertainty, maybe, or quiet pressure. "And I haven't found the deed yet," I said carefully. "I'll look tomorrow." There was a pause. Then he said, "Okay, no big deal. Ava's dad just wants to organize our paperwork. You know how he is. Very hands-on." Hands-on. Yes, I knew exactly what that meant. I kept my voice even. "I'll handle my documents when I'm ready." "I know, Mama, I know," he said quickly. "We're just trying to help." Help. People always use that word right before they take something. When the call ended, I placed the phone face down on the table and stared at the wall. My son wasn't a bad man, not cruel, not greedy. But love can be blind, and trust can be a leash if someone else is holding the other end. The third detail found me later that evening when I went to take out the trash. The sun had nearly disappeared, leaving a soft orange glow fading into the trees. As I rolled the bin to the curb, something caught my eye, a white SUV parked across the street. Not unusual, except the same SUV had passed my house twice that afternoon, slowly, too slow to be casual. As I watched, the car engine turned on and it drove away. No headlights, no rush, almost as if the driver didn't want to be seen. I stood there long after it disappeared, feeling a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with age. Everything was connected. The whispers, the clipboard man, the guardianship forms, Ava's sudden interest in my deed. The SUV is circling my street. Tiny pieces of a puzzle I hadn't asked to solve, but one that was slowly assembling itself in front of me. When I went back inside, the house felt different, heavier. I locked the door, then locked it again. I brewed more tea, but didn't drink it. I was too busy pacing the room, replaying every detail from the last 48 hours. Why the guardianship forms? Why walk around my property before dinner? Why ask for my deed at the exact moment I found those documents in the safe box? Why whisper about a plan that required me to be naive? It wasn't paranoia if the pattern was clear, and this pattern was no accident. Finally, I sat down at my husband's old desk, pulled out a notebook, and began to write. Dinner whispers. Plan. Questions about my house. Real estate man in the yard. Guardianship mail addressed to me. Ava is asking for the deed. SUV watching the house. Son is trusting them too much. Safe deposit box contents. Husband's warning. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. As I stared at the list, something terrifying and illuminating hit me. They weren't just trying to pressure me. They weren't just fishing for information. They weren't preparing to ask me for anything. They were preparing to move me out of my home, out of my independence, out of my own life. And they thought it would be easy. But for the first time since this began, a new thought settled in. They underestimated the wrong woman. This storm wasn't going to sweep me away. I was going to stand right in its center, and I was going to watch every lie unravel, one detail at a time. By the next morning, the guardianship forms were still sitting on my kitchen table. I hadn't touched them since opening the box, but I didn't need to. Just knowing they were there, sent to my address without my knowledge, was enough to keep my skin prickling with a cold, persistent awareness. It would have been easier to pretend nothing was happening, to tell myself I misunderstood, to believe Ava's family was simply helpful or organized, to accept that the whispers I overheard were about someone else. But lies never sit well in the stomach of a woman who has lived long enough to see what people become when they want something. Still, doubt lingered. Not about them, about myself. I was 67. I misplaced my glasses sometimes. I forgot why I walked into a room once or twice. I repeated a story at church last month and didn't realize until the ladies chuckled. Tiny things, ordinary things. But every tiny thing suddenly felt like evidence they could twist. Proof I was slipping. Proof I needed help. Proof they could use to take control. And that's when the most dangerous question crept in. What if they were right? I sat on the couch, wrapped in a soft burgundy shawl, staring at a dust mote drifting through a shaft of morning light. I hated that the question even existed. I hated how quietly it slid under my ribs, how it made me doubt my own mind. I pressed my palms to my temples, trying to gather my thoughts into something sharp instead of something soft and shaken. No, I wasn't losing anything. I wasn't confused. They were creating confusion. Deliberately, slowly, strategically. That realization alone made my breath sit heavy in my chest. Later that day, I called the insurance office listed on the envelope, using the number printed on the letter. A woman answered, her voice bright and processed, trained to sound trustworthy. "Tidewater Insurance. How may I assist you today?" "Yes, ma'am," I said calmly. "I received some guardianship documents I did not request. I'd like to know who initiated the order." She typed for a long moment. "That information is confidential, ma'am." My jaw clenched. "Confidential from the person whose name was used?" "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can only confirm that the request was processed through an attorney." "What attorney?" "I cannot disclose that either." I inhaled slowly, letting silence stretch long enough that she felt pressured to fill it. "Would you like me to note your refusal to proceed with the guardianship review?" she finally asked. Refusal. That single word made my pulse jump. "Yes," I said firmly. "Note that I am fully capable of managing my own affairs, and I did not authorize any paperwork." She typed again. Her tone shifted, barely, but enough. Understood. I hung up the phone and sat back, letting the truth settle deeper. Someone was actively filing things behind my back. Someone was pushing a process forward. Someone wanted to build a legal case against me, piece by piece. Not for my benefit, not for my protection, for my house, my assets, my independence. Around 3 that afternoon, I decided to take a walk to clear my mind. My neighborhood was usually peaceful, lined with tall oaks dripping Spanish moss, dogs barking lazily behind fences, porch swings creaking in the heat. But as I walked past the corner, movement caught my eye. A camera, a small one, pointed toward my house, attached to the porch of an Airbnb property across the street, but angled in a way that didn't make sense. Tilted just enough to frame my driveway, not the rental's walkway. I stopped walking. My heart thudded. That camera hadn't been there last week. My mind began stitching new threads into the growing tapestry of fear. First the clipboard man, then the SUV was circling my street, Then the guardianship forms, and now a camera watching my home. Watching me? I stepped closer, shielding my eyes from the sun. On the small box below the camera lens was a sticker. Authorized by whom? For what? I took a step back, then another. Something in my chest pulsed a warning. Don't touch it. Not because I was afraid of the camera, but because touching it might give them what they wanted. An image twisted out of context, another proof of instability, another excuse to call me unpredictable. So I turned around and walked home, every step measured, breath steady, face expressionless. When I got inside, my phone buzzed. Ava. Hi, Mom. We're thinking of stopping by tonight, just to check on you. Check on me. Dozens of memories flashed across my mind. Ava insisted on organizing my pantry last month. Ava is suggesting I shouldn't strain myself with yard work. Ava asked whether I still drove comfortably. Ava casually mentioned assisted living options for the future. Ava always offered to take important papers off my hands so I wouldn't lose them. It had all felt harmless then, helpful, thoughtful. But now, under this new light, every moment looked different, like turning a photograph and seeing a shadow that wasn't visible before. I typed a reply instead of speaking aloud. Not tonight. I'm resting. I hit send. Immediate 3 dots appeared. Typing. Then her response. Okay, just checking. Take it easy. Too sweet, too bright, too charming. Sugar can coat anything, even poison. As night fell, I sat at the kitchen table again with the guardianship forms spread out in front of me. I traced the edges slowly, thinking, not of fear this time, but of strategy. If they wanted to watch me, I'd let them. If they wanted to underestimate me, I'd let them. If they wanted to believe I was naive, I'd let them lean into the lie so fully that when truth finally hit them, it would hit like a brick wall. I wasn't slipping. I wasn't confused. And I wasn't alone. My husband's warning echoed softly in my ear. Don't let anyone make you small. So I closed the forms, slid them into a drawer, and whispered to the empty kitchen, I won't. The storm around me was growing, but I wasn't drowning. I was watching, and I was waiting. External confirmation. When other people start noticing. To the next morning, I woke with a heaviness that didn't belong to my bones. It sat deeper, behind the ribs, beneath the breath, in the place where fear and certainty finally meet. But I forced myself up, washed my face, brushed my curls back, made oatmeal with cinnamon, the way my husband loved it. Routine keeps the mind steady. I needed steadiness. Around 9 a.m., I opened the front door to bring in the paper and nearly bumped into someone standing on my porch. Lord, you scared me half to death, I whispered, pressing a hand to my chest. It was Mrs. Johnson, my church friend, my sometime lunch buddy, the closest thing I had to a sister these days. She clutched her purse like she had rushed over without thinking twice. Martha, she said quietly, I need to talk to you. Her tone alone made something in me clench. Well, come in, I said, stepping aside. She crossed the threshold, but instead of heading to the kitchen like she usually did, she stopped right there in the foyer, eyes moving across the room, scanning corners like she expected someone else to be listening. What's wrong? I asked. She took a steadying breath. I saw something last night. The way she said it, soft, heavy, made my stomach sink. What did you see? She hesitated, then pulled her phone from her purse. I didn't want to assume, but here. She opened a video. It was grainy, taken through her living room window across the street, but I could clearly see the shape of my house, faintly lit by the porch light. And in the shadows near my driveway, a figure stood, hood up, head slightly tilted as if studying the house, not moving, not knocking, just watching. My throat tightened. How long were they there? About 10 minutes, she whispered. They kept looking at your mailbox and then your bedroom window. And Martha, I think I saw them taking pictures. Her voice cracked on that last word. Pictures. Of my house? Of me? I leaned closer. The figure lifted something, maybe a phone, maybe a camera, the screen glowing faintly in the dark. "Why didn't you call me?" I asked, though the question came out gentler than it felt. "I wasn't sure what I was seeing," she said softly. "But when you didn't answer my text last night, I got worried." I hadn't even heard her text come through. My phone had been face down in the kitchen while I stared at guardianship forms I hadn't asked for. "Thank you," I murmured, "for telling me." She nodded, but her face stayed tense. "That's not the only reason I came," she added. "I overheard something at the grocery store." She swallowed. "It was your daughter-in-law. She was talking to another woman in the produce aisle. I only heard a little, but I heard her say, 'Once everything's finalized, she won't be living alone anymore.'" A chill ran through me. Finalized. Living alone. Transfer. Guardianship. The words tangled into a net I didn't choose to stand in. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from anger so controlled, so precise, it felt like a blade being sharpened. I closed my eyes, letting the anger settle into something calm. "So it's not just me," I said quietly. "No," she whispered. "It's not just you. Something's going on, Martha. I can feel it." I placed my hand over hers. The simple human touch steadied both of us. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table with her video replaying in my mind. The figure, the stillness, the sense of being watched. It was no longer paranoia. Someone had been at my house. Someone had been watching me. Someone had been documenting things without my knowledge. I stared out the window at the hydrangeas, blooming soft purple in the morning light. The sight of them, delicate but stubborn, reminded me of who I used to be before grief softened me, before widowhood made me quiet, before Ava's family mistook my silence for weakness. My husband always said, "Martha, when something feels wrong, trust that feeling. It's your spirit talking to you." And my spirit was screaming. Later that afternoon, I drove to the post office to drop off a few bills and ask about my mail. The clerk, a middle-aged man named Roy, who'd worked there longer than I'd lived in the neighborhood, greeted me with a frown. "Ms. Harris," he said, "you didn't tell us you were changing your forwarding address." My blood froze. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "The request was submitted yesterday, online, forwarding your mail to an address in Mount Pleasant." He tapped the computer screen. "I thought maybe you were moving." Moving. Someone was trying to redirect my mail without my permission. Every nerve in my body tightened. "I did not file that request," I said, voice sharp enough to slice the air. "Cancel it immediately and mark my account as restricted. No changes without my ID in person." He blinked, startled. "Yes, ma'am, right away." I stepped back from the counter, heart pounding. Now it was undeniable. Not a mistake, not a coincidence. A deliberate move, a coordinated attempt. First guardianship forms, then questions about my deed, then someone is watching my home, now mail forwarding. They were trying to erase my independence one piece at a time. As I walked back to my car, something made me turn. Across the parking lot, someone sat in a white SUV, the same one I'd seen near my house. The driver slouched low, but I caught a glimpse of their face behind the windshield. A man, late 40s, wearing a baseball cap. Our eyes met for a split second. Then he drove away, slowly, like he wanted me to know he wasn't in a hurry. I stood there in the hot sun, my purse hanging from my shoulder, my breath shallow. Fear tried to rise, but something stronger pushed it down. Something that had been sleeping inside me, waiting for the right moment. Not rage, not vengeance, clarity. They were watching me? Fine. Let them. Because now I wasn't just noticing the cracks. I was starting to see the whole structure of their plan. And the beautiful thing about seeing a structure is knowing exactly where to break it. The decision. Quiet steps toward the truth. I didn't go straight home after leaving the post office. My mind was still buzzing with the same cold electric awareness that hits right before a storm breaks. If someone had tried to forward my mail, then someone was getting bolder, closer, more desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. I just needed to start paying attention. I drove to a small park a few blocks away, found an empty bench under a magnolia tree, and sat with my purse in my lap. The air smelled sweet and heavy. Children ran around the playground, laughter floating across the breeze, so normal, so untouched by whatever darkness was creeping into my life. I opened my notebook, not the one where I wrote grocery lists and Sunday school reminders, the other one. The one my husband used to keep in his workshop, the one filled with small grids and precise lines, made for planning things that mattered. I flipped to a clean page and wrote at the top, "What I know." Then beneath it, "Guardianship paperwork mailed to my house, unauthorized forwarding request, camera facing my home, SUV is observing my property. Ava is asking for my deed, someone is on my driveway at night, whispers about the plan. Real estate man on my lawn. Husband's warnings. My son is trusting the wrong people." I stared at the list. It didn't look paranoid. It looked structured, organized, like a case file. I drew a line beneath the last point and wrote, "What they think. I'm naive. I'm passive. I live alone. I won't investigate. I'll sign anything." A slow breath left my chest. They believed they were dealing with a soft woman, a lonely widow, someone too grateful for attention to question their intentions. They were wrong. I closed the notebook and placed it back into my purse just as my phone buzzed. A text from my attorney friend, Denise. "Saw your missed call. Everything okay?" My fingers hovered over the screen for a long moment. Everything wasn't okay, not by a mile, but I wasn't ready to lay it all out yet. Not until I understood the shape of what I was dealing with. I typed, "Do you have time for coffee today? Need to ask something quietly." She replied almost instantly, "Give me some time. I'm free after 2. Back home, I walked through the door with a kind of caution I'd never felt in my own house. I set my keys down gently, listening, watching, feeling the air like a second skin. Nothing was out of place. But I was different. I went straight to the study and opened the drawer where I'd hidden the guardianship forms. I placed them neatly into a folder, labeled it "Unrequested Documents," and slid it to the back of the drawer. Then I did something I never imagined myself doing. I took out my phone and began taking pictures of everything: my mailbox, my driveway, the new camera across the street, and the SUV if it appeared again. Evidence wasn't paranoia. Evidence was protection. When I finished, I sat down on the couch and closed my eyes. My husband's voice whispered from memory, "When something doesn't add up, don't panic. Observe." Observe. Yes, that was what I needed. Not fear, not guessing, but clarity. At 2 p.m. sharp, I met Denise at a quiet cafe near the water. She was the kind of woman who carried authority like a second coat. Straight posture, sharp eyes, a mind that always ran 3 steps ahead. The moment she saw my face, her expression changed. "Martha, what's going on?" I told her everything. Not dramatically, not trembling, not as a victim. Just facts, one after another. The whispers, the clipboard, the mail forwarding, the SUV, the guardianship paperwork, Ava's questions about my deed. Someone is taking photos in night. Denise listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening with every detail. When I finished, she leaned in. "You're not imagining things," she said. "This is coordinated." My stomach dropped. "They're building a case," she continued. "Guardianship petitions require evidence, financial confusion, memory concerns, signs of vulnerability. If they can't find those signs, they'll create them." Cold washed down my spine. "That's why they're watching you," she said. "They're waiting for you to slip, or they want footage they can twist. Maybe you looking confused, maybe you stumbling, anything that can be framed as instability." I pressed a hand over my chest. "So what do I do?" Her answer came fast. "Document everything. and do nothing alone. She pulled out a small notepad and began writing. I'll check the forwarding request and that insurance company, and if someone filed anything with your name, we'll find out. A small part of me cracked open, relief, or something close to it. You're not losing your mind, she added gently. They're hoping you think you are. That sentence hit me like a cold wind. When we finished, she placed her hand over mine. Martha, whatever they're planning, it only works if you do nothing. And for the first time in days, I felt something rise inside me. Not fear, not anger, resolve. I straightened my shoulders. I don't plan on doing nothing, I said softly. When I got home, the sun was dipping low, turning the sky orange. I stood at my window, watching the street. No SUV, no strangers, no movement. But I didn't relax, because Denise was right. They weren't waiting for a chance to take my life. They were waiting for a chance to rewrite it. And as I stood there, hands steady, breath level, eyes sharp, I made a quiet promise to myself. They wouldn't get that chance. Not while I was still standing, not while I still had breath, not while I still had the truth. The plan they thought would be easy was about to get very, very difficult. I drove home from the cafe with Denise's warnings echoing in my mind like a low drum beat. Not imagined, not accidental, not coincidental, coordinated. The word itself felt like a key turning inside a lock I hadn't wanted to open. When I stepped into my house, the air felt heavier, not dangerous, but expectant, as if the walls themselves were waiting to see what I would do next. And for the first time since this started, I didn't move slowly. I didn't hesitate. I didn't sit down to think. I went straight to work. I pulled my husband's old workshop notebook from my purse, opened it on the dining table, and began creating a system, an actual case file. The same way he used to build plans for home repairs, clear notes, diagrams, steps. At the top of a clean page, I wrote, Case, attempts to remove my independence, and beneath it, I made 4 columns, event date, time, people involved, evidence collected. This wasn't fear anymore, this was clarity. I wrote slowly at first, my handwriting, round and steady, whispers during dinner, Friday, Ava's family, overheard directly. Real estate man in yard, Friday afternoon, Ava and unidentified male, seen by neighbor, guardianship packet mailed. Saturday, sender, Tidewater, physical envelope, mail forwarding request. Sunday, unknown requester, confirmed at the post office. SUV surveillance, multiple days, white SUV, male driver, seen by me and caught on neighbor's video. Camera angled at my house. Sunday, unknown installer, photograph taken. As the list grew, something else grew with it. A slow-burning certainty that the pattern wasn't only real, it was active. These people were working now, not planning to someday. They had already begun. When I finished, I exhaled and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in days, the picture in front of me wasn't shifting like fog. It was solid. But solid didn't mean complete. There were still blanks, still shadows, still questions. Who was the man with the clipboard? Who filed the forwarding request? Who installed the camera? Who asked Tidewater for guardianship documents? And why now? Why the rush? I didn't know yet, but I would. At around 6 p.m., as the sun lowered toward the tree line, I heard a knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent, but the kind of soft knock polite people use when they pretend not to intrude. Through the peephole, I saw my neighbor from 2 houses down, Mr. McAllister, a retired veteran, Kiwa-Wiet man, the type who notices things without ever saying much. He held a brown envelope in his hands. I opened the door just enough. "Evening, Martha," he said in his slow Carolina drawl. "Hope I'm not bothering you." "No bother at all," I said gently. "What can I do for you?" He shifted, clearing his throat. "Well, this got delivered to my porch by mistake." He handed me the envelope. "Figured it belonged to you." Again, another misdirected piece of mail. But the sender's name made my breath catch. Hearthstone Assisted Living, Intake Department. I opened it right there on the porch. Inside was a glossy brochure and a partially filled application form with my name printed at the top. I felt the porch floor tilt beneath me. Mr. McAllister saw the look on my face and frowned. "You all right, ma'am?" I fought to keep my hand steady. "I'm fine," I lied softly. "Thank you for bringing this to me." He nodded, slowly, thoughtfully, and before turning to leave, he added, "If anything don't feel right, you let me know. I sit on my porch most evenings. I see more than folks think." Our eyes met, and I realized he had noticed things, maybe more than I knew. That alone struck something deep and grounding inside me. When I closed the door, I pressed my back against it and looked at the brochure still in my hands. The rooms, the hallways, the memory care wing, the medical insignia, and my name. Already typed into the form, someone wasn't just planning to move me. They were making arrangements, actual arrangements. The walls of my house felt closer now, not suffocating, but protective, like they were holding me in place long enough for me to see the truth clearly. I laid the brochure next to the guardianship forms and stared at them side by side. 2 different origins, 2 different pathways, 1 identical goal, and all of it is happening within a few days. That wasn't a coincidence. That was timing, and timing meant urgency. Urgency meant motive, and motive meant someone stood to gain something big by removing me, my house, my accounts, my assets, my autonomy. Something snapped quietly into focus, not loudly, not dramatically, just a small click in the back of my mind. Caleb's fiancé, her family, the rush to organize paperwork, the real estate questions, the dinner whispers, the sudden interest in assisted living facilities, the camera, the mailbox, the SUV. All of it could be explained by one simple, ugly truth. They wanted the house, and the easiest way to get it was to remove me from it. But wanting something wasn't the same as getting it, not with me standing in their way. I sat back down at the table, opened the notebook, and added the new items to my growing file. The page was nearly full now. As I looked at it, black ink forming a map of everything done behind my back, a calm washed through me. Not fear, not despair. A calm that came from knowing exactly where I stood and exactly what I needed to do next. I whispered into the quiet of my house, almost like a prayer, but steadier. They think I'm walking into their plan. I turned a page in the notebook, uncapped my pen, and wrote, "What they don't know, I'm building my own plan." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something powerful blooming inside my chest. Control. Real, steady, grounded control. The kind they never imagined I still had. The trail leads somewhere. And I decide to follow it. By Monday morning, I had a full page of evidence and another page of questions. But one thing bothered me more than the rest, even more than the guardianship forms or the assisted living application. The man with the clipboard. He wasn't a relative. He wasn't a friend. And he didn't belong in my yard. He was the only piece of this puzzle I hadn't connected to a name or a motive. And puzzles with missing pieces never sit right with me. Not when the missing piece is a man studying my property before dinner, as if tallying something on a list. So I decided to find him. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like an old quilt being unfolded 1 layer at a time. I parked 3 blocks from the real estate office where I'd seen Ava and the man that afternoon. The building sat near the water, all glass windows and bright white trim. The kind of place that sold expensive homes to people who never asked about the electricity bill. I took a steady breath, checked my reflection in the mirror, and reminded myself who I was. Not a victim, not naive, not lost, just a woman who wanted the truth. Inside, the office smelled of lemon polish and fresh paper. A receptionist in a pastel blazer looked up and smiled the kind of smile people give to elderly women. Warm, gentle, slightly patronizing. "Good morning. How can I help you?" I returned her smile just as sweetly. I'm looking for a real estate agent I met briefly last week. Tall gentleman carrying a clipboard. Brown hair, mid-40s. She blinked, thinking, then nodded. Oh, you must mean Kevin. Kevin. A name. At last. Is he in today? I asked. She clicked through her computer. He stepped out to show a property, but should be back within the hour. Would you like to wait? I would, I said, settling into a chair by the window. As I sat there, I watched the receptionist speak to a coworker at the printer. She didn't lower her voice enough. The young couple looking at that house on Sinclair, they want to move fast. The girlfriend's parents are pushing. Something about securing property before the wedding. My heart thudded. Young couple. Move fast. Parents pushing. A cold thought crept through my mind. They're trying to buy a house. A bigger one. A better one. And they're planning to use mine to do it. Before I could sink deeper into that thought, the front door chimed again. Ava walked in. My breath stopped, but only for a second. Then everything inside me went still. She stood there in heels and a cream blouse, scrolling her phone, oblivious to me in the corner. Her expression was focused, almost anxious, and when she reached the counter, she asked, "Is Kevin back yet? My dad needs those comps today." Comps. Comparative market analysis. For property value. My property? The receptionist shook her head. Not yet. Should be soon. Ava exhaled sharply, annoyed. Please tell him my family needs the numbers this week. We can't make any decisions until he finalizes the valuation for... She stopped. Not because of hesitation, because she finally saw me. Her eyes widened just slightly, surprised, then quickly masked with a smile too bright to be honest. Mom, what a surprise. I smiled back, gentle and warm, the same smile I'd given her family that night. What are you doing here? She asked, trying to sound casual. I rose from my seat slowly, smoothing my cardigan. Just taking care of some personal business. Oh? Her voice stretched thin. I tilted my head toward the receptionist. Your friend here was just helping me. The receptionist blinked at us both, suddenly uncertain. Ava tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Well, I'm here to pick up something for my dad. You know how much he loves being prepared. Prepared, yes. I knew. Better now than ever. Before I could answer, the door chimed again, and Kevin, the clipboard man, walked in. For a moment, all three of us were locked in a strange triangle of silence. He glanced at Ava first, then at me. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Not friendly recognition. The startled kind, like someone seeing a ghost they didn't expect to meet twice. Ava hurried to him. "Kevin, did you—" But he interrupted her with a brief nod before turning to me. "Ma'am, I believe we've met." "Yes," I said softly. "On my lawn." Ava stiffened. "Your lawn? Why were you—" Kevin swallowed. His eyes flicked between us. I was just assessing the property lines for... I lifted a hand, stopping him. "Be careful," I said gently. "It's easy to lose your footing when you're standing on someone else's ground." Ava's face paled. For the first time, she seemed unsure, like her script had gone missing. She reached for Kevin's arm. "We should go," she whispered. "My dad is waiting." He nodded quickly, and together they hurried out of the office, too fast to be casual, too synchronized to be innocent. I watched them disappear into the parking lot, then stepped toward the receptionist. "Thank you for your help," I said softly. She nodded, confused but polite. As I walked out, the warm air hit my skin like a warning. I had confirmation now, not guesses, not glimpses, not suspicions. Ava and her family weren't just circling me. They were circling my home, my property, my future, and whatever they planned with that real estate agent, whatever they needed so urgently, wasn't going to stop. Not unless I stopped it. I opened my notebook the moment I returned to the car and wrote, "Kevin. Real estate agent involved Ava is present at the office. Parents pushing valuation urgency confirmed." Then beneath it, I wrote one more line. "They're moving faster. So must I. the cracks in their plan, and the first signs of collapse. I didn't drive home right away. Not after seeing Ava in that real estate office, whispering urgently about valuations and timelines. Not after watching Kevin, the clipboard man, go pale like a child caught with a hand in the cookie jar. I sat in my car with the engine off, notebook open on my lap, letting the pieces settle into place. Ava wasn't acting alone. Her parents weren't advising. They were directing. And Kevin wasn't just a bystander. He was their instrument, their eyes, their valuation expert. They were building something fast, something that required secrecy, pressure, and a convenient problem to remove: me. But what they didn't realize was this. The moment Kevin recognized me, his fear told me more than any document ever could. A guilty man fears recognition. A guilty man needs shadows, and I had dragged him straight into the light. When I finally reached home, I parked in the driveway but stayed in the car for a moment, watching the street. No SUV today, no figure by the mailbox, no camera movement across the road. But absence wasn't comfort. Absence meant they were adjusting. People who believe they're losing control always adjust. Inside the house, I placed my notebook on the dining table and opened a new page. Parties involved. Ava's parents. Kevin, real estate agent. Tidewater insurance clerk. Unknown SUV driver. Whoever installed the camera. Whoever filed the mail forwarding. Whoever sent assisted living intake. I drew a circle around all their names and wrote in the center: motive. My home. When I stepped back and looked at the page, something shifted in me. Not fear, not even anger, power. Because once you understand someone's motive, you understand their weakness, and greed is predictable. Late that afternoon, as the sky dimmed to a warm orange, my phone rang. It was Denise. "I found something," she said, no greeting, no hesitation. My heart tightened. "Tell me." "There's a preliminary guardianship inquiry in the county system. Not a full petition, but the first stage. Someone gathering information, claiming concerns about your well-being. They haven't filed the petition itself yet, but they've put your name into the process." Cold air seemed to fill the room. "Who requested it?" "That's the thing," she murmured. "It's anonymous." Anonymous, cowardly, calculated. "They're testing the waters," Denise continued, "seeing how far they can go before someone pushes back." I sat down slowly. What does that mean for me? It means, Martha, that the next move is theirs, unless you make it first. I closed my eyes, breathing in deeply. "What do you suggest?" She spoke plainly. "Become unpredictably predictable." A small, humorless smile tugged at my lips. "That sounds like something my husband would say." "It means," she explained, "you act normal enough that they think you're unchanged, but prepared enough that when they strike, you're already holding the evidence." I opened my eyes. "I'm ready." Her voice softened. "I know you are." After we hung up, the house felt different. Not threatening, not heavy. Ready. I began collecting everything into one large binder. The guardianship forms, the misdirected mail, the intake brochure, photos of the camera, screenshots of Ava's messages, notes from neighbors, and the safe deposit documents. Page by page, the truth formed a spine inside that binder, a spine stronger than fear. The doorbell rang, not loudly, not impatiently, but with a politeness that made my stomach knot instantly. Through the peephole, I saw Ava and Caleb. My son's face was warm, hopeful. Ava's was polished, soft, rehearsed. My heart squeezed, not because of fear, but because of the tenderness I still held for the boy I raised. The boy who believed people until experience told him otherwise. The boy who, in his eagerness to start a new life, overlooked the roots trying to choke the old one. I opened the door. "Mom!" Caleb smiled, pulling me into a hug. We were in the area and thought we'd stop by. A lie. A gentle one. He believed it, but a lie. Ava stepped forward with a casserole dish. "Thought you might need dinner," she said sweetly. I smiled the kind of smile only older women can. Gentle, controlled, impenetrable. "That's thoughtful," I said. "Come in." They did. Of course they did. We sat in the living room, the casserole untouched on the coffee table. Caleb chatted about work, about wedding preparations, about the future. Ava chimed in occasionally, each word soft as cotton, but lined with something sharper. Then Caleb said it. The sentence they had rehearsed. "Mom, have you thought about, maybe, I don't know, getting more help around the house?" Ava's eyes flicked to mine. She smiled, soft, encouraging, calculated. I let a calm silence fall over the room. Then I nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about many things lately," I said, "and I'm glad you brought it up." Relief washed across Caleb's face. Ava straightened slightly, because they didn't know what I meant, not yet. "I've also been organizing my documents," I added. Ava's fingers twitched. Just a little, but enough. "And I've been paying attention." Her smile faltered. "Paying attention to what?" she asked softly. I looked directly at her, steady, quiet, unwavering. To everything. For the first time, a shadow crossed her eyes. Not guilt, not fear, recognition. She knew in that moment that I knew. Caleb didn't see it, but she did. And I held her gaze long enough to let the truth sink in. Not spoken, not shouted, but delivered silently. "I am not the woman you think I am, and this house is not yours to take." When they left that evening, Ava walked ahead to the car. Caleb hugged me again, warm and sincere. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too." But as I watched them drive away, the wind pushing the last light out of the sky, I felt something settle inside me. Not dread, not confusion, not fragility, strength. Because tonight told me one thing. They were ready to make their move. And now, so was I. The big reveal, confrontation, and the truth finally surfaces. The next morning, I woke to the soft hum of the air conditioner and a faint light filtering through the blinds. But I wasn't asleep long enough to feel rested. The storm had not passed. It had only paused, simmering. I made coffee, strong, black, the bitter aroma waking every nerve. I sat at the table, notebook open, documents spread around me. The binder was now thick, heavy, complete enough to start showing its teeth. Everything. The mail forwarding request, the guardianship forms, the camera, the SUV, the assisted living brochure, Kevin's real estate antics, Ava's calculated questions, was now connected. Layer upon layer, a deliberate attempt to remove me from my home and independence. And now, for the first time, I could see the path clearly. I didn't need to panic. I didn't need rage. I needed execution. By mid-morning, I called Denise. "Bring everything you have," I said. "I'll be at the house in 30 minutes. We're moving forward." Denise didn't ask why. She knew why. Because when someone tries to take what is yours, preparation is not optional. When she arrived, I opened the binder and laid out every single piece of evidence on the dining table. Documents, photos, screenshots, neighbor statements, all meticulously annotated with dates, times, and observations. "I think they think I'm naive," I said softly, "that I'll sign anything, that I'll ignore what's happening." Denise glanced at the binder. "They underestimated you, and that's their mistake." I smiled faintly. "Not anymore." We spent the next hour going through each item. She explained legal implications of the guardianship forms, the forwarding requests, and the assisted living paperwork. She advised me how to file notices, how to document every encounter, how to protect my assets while keeping everything hidden from those who thought they could manipulate me. It was tedious, careful work, but it gave me power. The kind of power that comes from knowing the truth and knowing what the other side doesn't. Power, like a quiet fire. Later that afternoon, Caleb called. "Mom, I was just checking in. Everything okay?" I let the line hum with silence for a moment. "Everything's fine, Caleb," I said slowly, "but I want you to understand something. The house, the documents, the decisions, they are mine. Not anyone else's, not Ava's, not her parents', not even yours until I decide otherwise." There was a pause. Then, soft, careful, "I understand, Mom." "Good." That was enough for now. The real confrontation came that evening when Ava and her parents arrived unannounced, carrying smiles that didn't reach their eyes. I let them in. I made tea. I smiled. And I waited. Ava began, rehearsed, polished. "Mom, we just wanted to check in, see if you needed anything, maybe help with some of the paperwork." I held up my hand, stopping her words. "I know," I said softly. "Everything you wanted me to do, everything you planned behind my back. I know. And I've been preparing." Her smile faltered slightly. Her parents exchanged a glance. I gestured to the binder on the table. "All of this is documented. Every attempt, every misstep, every false step you thought I wouldn't notice." Ava's mother opened her mouth. I waited. I waited while their careful rehearsals collided with reality. I waited as the quiet tension built, like a drum rolling before a storm. Then I spoke again, each word slow, deliberate. "You thought I was naive, that I would sign anything, that I would ignore your efforts to take my independence, that I would believe I was alone." Ava shifted, voice tight. We were just trying to do what?" I cut in, calm, unwavering. "Take what is mine?" I leaned slightly forward. "Move me out of my house? Redirect my mail? File guardianship forms under my name without my consent?" Her father's face paled. Ava's lips pressed into a thin line. The room was silent but for the quiet hum of the heater. I opened the binder, flipping through pages with deliberate care, showing screenshots, photographs, copies of forms, and the letter from the bank. "This," I said, holding the guardianship forms toward them, "and this," lifting the assisted living brochure, "and this," pointing to Kevin's real estate documents, "are all documented. All. And every one of these attempts to manipulate me will be presented to the authorities if necessary." They couldn't speak. Their rehearsed arguments dissolved into thin, fragile lines of excuses. I took a slow breath, and for the first time, I allowed a hint of the smile that had carried me through these weeks to cross my face. "You wanted me to be afraid," I said softly. "You wanted me to believe I had no voice. You wanted me to be small." Ava's mother whispered something. An apology? A plea? I didn't need to hear. "But," I continued, steady as the oak trees outside my window, "I am neither afraid nor silent nor small, and I am still here, standing, watching, and protecting what is mine." Caleb, who had stood silently, finally spoke. "Mom, I didn't realize." "Now you do," I said, "and it's time all of you understand. Manipulation has consequences." Ava's eyes filled finally with the first crack of recognition. She understood in that moment the depth of the miscalculation. I closed the binder gently. "This house, these documents, my life, they are not negotiable, and anyone who thinks otherwise will find out exactly how seriously I take my independence." I turned to Caleb. "You've seen everything now. Do not forget it." He nodded solemnly. I looked back at Ava and her parents, who shrank back slightly, faces pale, realization dawning, and I finally understood something myself. I had not only survived their plan, but I had turned their ignorance, their arrogance, and their haste into proof of my own strength. They had thought this would be easy. It would not be, and it never would be again. Aftermath, new order, lessons learned, and a life reclaimed. The house was quiet after Ava and her parents left. Too quiet, perhaps, for the weight of what had just occurred. The air smelled faintly of chamomile and the lingering aroma of the tea I had poured hours ago. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, soft and calm, like nothing had changed, but everything had. I walked through the room slowly, touching each surface with care. My hands lingered on the banister, the dining table where the confrontation had unfolded, the bookshelves lined with my husband's journals. Each object, each memory felt heavier and lighter at the same time. Heavier because they were mine, lighter because no one could take them from me now, not without consequence. Caleb was in the living room, still processing, sitting on the couch with a mix of relief and awe on his face. "You were incredible, Mom," he said quietly, almost reverently. I didn't understand until now." I nodded. "I've been watching for weeks, making sure I had the pieces. They thought I would be afraid. They thought I would be naive. They were wrong." He reached out and touched my hand. "I'll never forget this." The gesture warmed me, but my mind was already moving forward. Surviving this wasn't enough. They had tried to dismantle me, to manipulate my life. If I wanted true peace, I needed to do more than defend myself. I needed to reclaim purpose. Over the next few days, I began a slow, deliberate restoration of order. The binder remained open on the dining table, a constant reminder of the vigilance required. I called Denise to ensure all the guardianship forms were noted as canceled, filed complaints regarding the mail forwarding attempt, and documented every incident of surveillance. Every piece of evidence was cross-checked, labeled, and safely stored. Each step reinforced the knowledge that preparation and careful action were the antidotes to manipulation. I also began reaching out to neighbors and friends who had noticed irregularities. Mrs. Johnson came over one afternoon, bringing cookies and concern in equal measure. "Martha," she said, "if you ever need backup, I'll be here, and others in the neighborhood feel the same." Their acknowledgement transformed my anger into something constructive. It reminded me that isolation was never absolute. I wasn't just protecting myself. I was building a network of witnesses, of allies, quietly ensuring that nothing could be repeated. Then came the decision about the house itself. For weeks, I had thought about selling, about moving somewhere quieter, but every time I considered it, the thought of leaving the space that held so many memories, both joy and pain, felt unbearable. The house itself had been a target, a prize in someone else's plan, but now it could become a symbol instead, a symbol of resilience, autonomy, and control. I chose to remain, not out of stubbornness, not out of fear, out of choice, and I decided to do more than just live. I began working on creating a foundation dedicated to supporting women in my age group, particularly those at risk of exploitation by family members or unscrupulous caretakers. The first project was modest, a small community fund to provide emergency legal advice and temporary shelter for elderly women facing coercion or pressure to relinquish property. Each document, each case, was tied to the stories I had witnessed in my own life. Each success would echo the lesson I had learned. Vigilance, clarity, and careful action could protect not only oneself, but others who might not yet know they needed protection. Weeks turned into months. The house settled into a rhythm of quiet confidence. Caleb became more involved in ensuring that my affairs were fully secure, attending appointments with me and Denise. Ava and her parents withdrew gradually, realizing the depth of oversight and the inability to manipulate the household. I began to resume daily pleasures I had neglected during the weeks of tension, tending the garden, reading late into the evening, writing letters to friends, even starting to paint again, something I had abandoned decades ago. These acts were small, but they reminded me that control over one's life extended beyond the legal and practical. It included peace of mind, creativity, and freedom to choose every day. On a warm Saturday morning, I sat on the porch with a notebook in hand. Sunlight danced through the magnolia leaves, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine. I reflected on everything that had occurred, the deliberate attempts to remove me from my home and independence, and the revelation that had changed everything. I thought about Ava, about Caleb, about Kevin, about the quiet observer neighbors. I considered what fear and manipulation can do to a mind and how easily people mistake gentleness for weakness. I also understood now that true autonomy requires constant vigilance, but also the courage to act when necessary. I wrote a short note, as much for myself as for anyone who might read it one day. I am 67 years old. I have faced betrayal, surveillance, and manipulation. I have seen the truth, acted with patience, and reclaimed my life. My independence is mine alone, and my voice will not be silenced. Let this house, these walls, and these memories remind any who would attempt similar schemes. Power is not in age, nor wealth, nor cunning. It is in clarity, preparation, and the courage to stand. That afternoon, Caleb asked, "Mom, are you happy?" I looked at him and smiled, a real smile this time, unguarded, complete. "Yes," I said, "I am. Not because anyone else has been defeated, but because I have reclaimed myself, and that is worth more than any victory over them." And as the sun set over Charleston, casting long shadows across the garden, I knew this was not just survival. It was life, renewed and fully my own. No one could take that from me. No one ever would. And somewhere deep inside, I felt it. The quiet, steady pulse of freedom. The storm had passed, but its lessons lingered, as they should, and I was stronger for them.